So this talk is, I think, important at the current moment where many of the decentralized governance systems and DAOs and mechanisms and groups and communities are having kind of hard conversations. And my spy work throughout the last few years of the DAO ecosystem has been doing this without asking for anyone's permission. And I feel like I know a couple of things about it, so I'm going to share it with you guys. And it's all about polarity management. It's about problems that don't have a correct solution. If you are a person that's constantly trying to get something going and you never get to the end of your problem, you're probably dealing with something which deals with managing polarities. So I'm just going to jump into it because there's no perfect stance, and you are probably tired right now, and you're probably listening to a lot of people, and I want to share with you what I know about this type of problem and why it's different from discrete solvable issues, right? So this is an action reflection set for hyper-aware practitioners acting within DAOs. So what do I mean about this, right? What is a hyper-aware practitioner? You know, like a jet fighter pilot, or a sculptor, or a race car driver, or a surgeon. You're dealing with high-stakes problem solving in the moment, and it has an athletic component to it, right? But I'm talking in that type of problem while the substrate is social relationships and value creation in groups. So this is the theme. And if you feel a little bit lost midway, watch the recording, ask me questions, watch the full set of talks that are going to come next, and the panel at the end. It was also curated by us from the DAOist, and they are all softly interlinked. Cool? Everybody good? Are you guys scared? You look scared. Okay, so people who deal with this type of problem are usually called facilitators, which is a name that I don't like very much. I call myself a process development practitioner or a process consultant, but my job is not to make things easier for everyone all the time. And the assumption that easier is better is not amazing, right? Sometimes our job is to actually remember people about the hard things and then hold space for the resolution of that situation. So I think I'm a meta-organizational janitor, right? Mop up on aisle 5, heavy emotional labor required. We support transformation processes. And so if you feel like these little provocations I made, you're like, that's the type of stuff I'm dealing with. This talk is for you, just for you. Everybody else is going to kind of, what is he talking about? But you're the one who's been mopping up emotional damage on aisle 5. I try to put this together for you, okay? And the most important concept is that transformation and change are different. I can come and I can move this chair here, and I changed it, and I can move it back, and I changed it again. So these discrete solution-driven problems, it's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about today about things that transform from one thing to the other, and once the cat is out of the bag, there's no turning back. And if you've ever been in DAOs, you know that this is the case with governance, right? The more distributed governance is, the harder, like the more Schrodinger the cat gets, and it's really hard to bag quantum cats. So let's keep going, right? Transformation is also larger than change. It doesn't mean it's better, right? But being in transformation support mode means being aware of everything that happens around it and everything that happened before. So that's why I feel it's really related to pottery in some way. You have this lump of clay that's just spinning, and you're live at that moment helping shape that, but you also have to respect everything that happened to that clay before and respect how much elasticity it has. Where can it go right now, right? And this is also the case with governance. You can't really come and install an external mindset to a group of humans. You have to transform a mindset from where it is. You have to kind of love it too, right? So before, everybody was really, really, really excited about becoming a butterfly, and now everybody's like, I miss munching on leaves. This political work is hard, right? So that's what I mean about it being larger. It encompasses all the change processes that are happening, and it permeates the space between, right? So I'm gonna let you finish, but living social systems can't be stopped. You cannot pause the political process and the process of people creating opinions, strategizing, talking to each other, all the game theoretical positioning that is happening within everything to say, hey, just give me a moment, pause everything you're thinking, because I'm going to figure this out. I just need 2 weeks, top of a mountain, meditating, and then I'll come back. There's no way to do this. Everything is happening. Capital flows, influence, treasury spend, votes, proposals are coming in. The more distributed, the more turbulent it is. So how do we intervene in this type of thing? How do we even plan to intervene in this type of thing? And how do we survive when it doesn't go the way we planned, which is way more often than not, right? Especially in times like these when the market sentiment changes, it's kind of like everything that you prepared for, every conversation, everything you learned, everything you mapped about that system, every right or wrong thing you've done will collapse in this type of forcing function moment when abundance shifts to scarcity, and all the hard conversations that we could afford to ignore before suddenly all come slapping us in the face, right? Oops. And now it's time for like social athletics. Now it's time for your heart to get really big. My kendo sensei used to say, your heart needs to be really big. You need to fail a lot to succeed. I don't think so, but your heart certainly needs to be really big at times like this, right? So the first question about state transformation that I want to ask you guys is, what happens to water at 99 degrees Celsius at ideal conditions of pressure? Anybody has the answer? Well, yeah, it just kind of sits there sublimating at the same rate it was sublimating before. Nothing actually happens. You need to achieve a certain degree of temperature for state change to ensue. So the first thing I want to tell you is, like, if there's something to be addressed in this transformational state where you have been aware of everything that happened before and now you want to actually touch that continuum, you need to create ideal conditions where people actually care and actually are able to deploy enough attention to change the state together. So this is kind of an obvious step that people often ignore, and it usually creates a lot of problems, right? So how do I do this? How do I check if there's enough attention present in the system for us to start state change, right? I think about pulse and flow, right? We tend to think about flow being a good thing. Even at the DAOist, we say flow over control, right? But if you flow forever, nothing will happen. There's a rhythmic dance between flow and pulse, right? So the first thing I want you to think when you're managing polarities is, if things are going way towards one polarity, if flow is taking you towards too much complacence or too much conflict, any of the two polarities that you're trying to manage, maybe it's time for a pulse. A pulse is a moment where whatever was happening gets interrupted and you have a chance to think, a chance to sense, a chance to breathe, a chance to discover, right? So everybody usually prefers to stay in a state of flow, and within your organization there will be people who are biased towards flow. I would say that those people that are unwilling to give bad news because they don't want to get into conflict, or they're trying always to diffuse conflict, or they're never looking at the possible disagreement that lives in a discussion. And you have people who are biased towards pulse. And you know who these people are as well. They're the ones who tend to complain more often. They're always putting needs out into the social fabric. They're more aware of their attrition, right? You also should pay attention on who are the people in the organization that have these tendencies, because they will be your allies in moments of increasing flow or increasing pulse, right? They will be people that you can actually tap into to give more voice to a perspective that is pulsy or flowy, right? Sorry for the fuzziness of this technology, but it's what it is. And I think this is an important sentence here, that the satisfied animal sleeps. So if you need to get stuff done and everybody's really satisfied and soft, it's probably not going to happen. You need to wake up, right? So problem is knowing when to pulse, right? It's not everyone that has to the right or earned the legitimacy to pulse a system on purpose. And as a facilitator, that moment is kind of dangerous, because you might be uninvited from having that leadership or influence over the system because pulse is uncomfortable, right? So how do we earn the right to pulse? Because this is maybe the biggest part of the job, is to earning the desire of the people who you're working with to actually be with you, playing with you through moments that are sometimes incredibly funny, delightful, and endearing, and moments that feel like shit because we noticed something we have been comfortably ignoring for a long time. And holding space for that conflict is gold. And the sentence before, right? There's way more social value to honest conflict than dishonest harmony. I'm a big believer in this, but it doesn't mean that we have to be fighting all the time, right? So the game of learning how to disagree constructively or to be in collaborative conflict is, for me, the most important game for DAOs and decentralized systems. Okay, so another tool in your box, because you're trying to earn that respect, that right to pulse and flow and to guide and suggest, it's what I call perception and resolution moves. So let's say that the most valuable thing in the world is where things like this, when everybody's got their attention together in the same place. This is rare. This doesn't happen all the time, especially within organizations. That moment where you go on the offsite, that moment where you actually get together, that moment is golden, right? And you have to prepare to get there, especially if you're going to make an intervention, as I was saying, right, with the little knife. Follow the emojis. Perception movements are movements where you open up the system to know more about itself and for you to find out more about the system. There's no specific goal of getting anything done. You're letting the system speak, and there's many methodologies to do this, but what I want you to know is if you're dealing with this, if you feel unsure of an intervention, too unsure, design a perception move that precedes it. Design as many as necessary until the system knows enough about itself that it itself biases towards action, right? When people really, like when the idea comes from the system itself, and you were the holder of the space of perception, you will inherently receive legitimacy to hold space for the resolution. And then it's kind of like the design thinking triangle. You open, you generate alternatives, you discover, 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 and naturally the involved feel like coming to a conclusion together. Again, remember about the flowy and the pulsy people? I also want to talk about the facilitators themselves. They also have their biases or their internal polarities. You know people who are sailors, people who are biased towards being in the moment, in direct contact with people. They have their ideas, they're extroverts most likely, and they have their ideas by conversing with people, right? And then you have the people who kind of retreat, and they like looking from things from overview mode, in German, Übersicht, and they like, I get it, and they draw maps, and they're on the phone, and they're making little circles and connecting it with arrows, right? The sailors and cartographers, people who like to be on the boat, and people who like to map the journey. These are different archetypes. And sometimes in my life, I'm really like in sailor mode, and sometimes I'm really in cartographer mode. Like when I did the DAO canvas, I was from far away, right? The last 4 years, I've been on the boat naked, raining on me, like trying not to get hailed on and dodging lightning, you know? I think cartography is coming next again. And it's important because you should indulge in this. Whatever's making you excited, you should just fucking embrace it as much as you can and go deep and learn a lot because it is going to change, right? But the point is, try to map your own bias. Because when you are in a stewardship, facilitation, polarity management, position, leadership, whatever, try to neutralize your current bias. Try to empower voices that are actually purposefully different than yours, that are looking at the same problem from a different angle. That will help you survive. It will increase your legitimacy too. Because this intervention moment, and that's actually what is missing from this talk, because there's many frameworks, there's design thinking, there's sociocracy, holacracy, blah, blah, blah. There's many things you can read, but what is missing from all of these frameworks is the authority, legitimacy, perception movements that should be happening very, very intently, on purpose, all throughout, for that holy moment when everybody get in a room and try to get something done together. And how do you get there is kind of what I wanted to talk about today, because I am participating in many hard conversations with DAOs. and they're suffering, right? So let me quickly flow through a prescriptive way to go about this, right? So just so you can think about, like, come talk to me later, let's go through this about your own problem, come to the Meta Hub, let's talk about it. And sorry, this isn't, like, I didn't talk about the DAOist today, but I should, maybe. So stages of the practice of social development, right? I would never go anywhere, at least with an intuitive stakeholder constellation mapping, right? So who are the players? How do they form into groups? How do they relate to the immediate social neighborhoods? And what are the power relationships, tensions, and incentives involved? Even just the attempt at making a very imperfect map of this will prepare you grandly for anything, including your next phone call. Do it, it's fun. So, when you are preparing for an intervention, you should at least put 4 times, 5 times the time that it lasts into designing it. And always ask yourself, what is the theory of change of this intervention? So theory of change is a fancy way of saying, what do I expect that will be possible for this social system that wasn't possible before the intervention? If you don't have a clear desired outcome for this, better not do anything. I sincerely tell you, better not do anything, because somebody else's theory of change will hijack your intervention moment, and then you're... Okay, so once you do have a theory of change in the design, you're probably not the person calling all the shots in this system. So try to validate it with the constellation. Maybe in backhaul conversations, maybe having a proper meaning of validation, which is an intelligent perception movement, creates transparency. Anything that makes you understand if or not your design will set off some hidden social mine or bomb that is hiding in the field and destroy your capacity to lead it forward or cause damage to the social process in a way that you will not be able to put back in the bag. And then, if your design is crucial and you're like, fuck, man, if this goes wrong, I'm fucked. We are all fucked. Build authority. Authority not in an annoying way. Earn the trust of the system so you can do something with them. There's many ways to do this, but as long as you respect your ignorance and that you need to actually bring everyone together with you, make this a discrete step, it should work. And then intervention time. You do the thing, a lot happens, sometimes contact sport, people get hurt, then what happened, right? We forget to assess and to make sense of what happened together. We had the fucking offsite. Talk as much as possible because no one will agree about what happened in that room. There will be 17 stories. You need to map them, right? What's possible now after? Is it the same thing you wanted, right? Don't attack it directly. Ask many oblique questions because no external solution will survive the system. The solution has to come from the system. Your job is not to bring the solution, it's to find the one that's already hidden in it, right? And please, don't bring your ideology into the process. You're a servant. Remember this, right? You're just looking for ignition and integrity. People who are alive and people who are sincere. And if you make those people powerful in your system will probably do fine, right? Don't go to Google and find a framework and then try to follow it like a fucking cake recipe. This will destroy you, right? Look for signs of flowering and decay, and you'll do fine. That's it. That's my talk.
Thank you. That was very inspiring and